Welcome everybody. I'm very excited to have everybody listening here and those that may be watching the recording on our sort of informal talk around setting up early birds at the Australian Museum. So my name is Sarah Ahmed. I run a few projects at the Australian Museum. I run sustainability, diversity and inclusion, and I also run our accessibility and inclusion action plan. Before I begin, I'd like to say that this always has and always will be Aboriginal land. I pay respect to elders past and present and any Indigenous people on this call. I also offer my gratitude to the knowledge and stewardship of this land through deep time. It is exactly this care of country, this stewardship by the Indigenous people of a place that we all need to learn from. So I'm going to introduce our lineup of speakers today. We have a truly fantastic bunch, so this is very exciting to have everybody in the room together, in different rooms. So Cordelia Hugh is the Australian Museum's creative producer. She works in programming, developing programs for children and families. From Autism Australia, we have Emma Gallagher. Emma is an autistic consultant that works in research and practice. And we also have Matt Oster, who is a project officer also at Aspect. Joining us today, talking about the hidden disability sunflower lanyards, we have Elen La Rochelle. She is the business manager for hidden disabilities at Bailey House. A few quick points on housekeeping. Everyone's computers are muted. Please pop your questions in the chat function on the side and we will unmute everyone at the end and we can answer questions. So just quickly, the objective of the presentation this morning. So the first is to share the process and steps that went into setting up early birds. And the point being so that we can assist others in making it easier to do the same. This is such an incredibly important area to be working in, and at the AM we believe very strongly in sharing and working collectively to drive better outcomes. Secondly, I would also like to float the idea of potential future collaborations so that we can drive outcomes more widely, not just within our cultural institutions, but across Sydney, New South Wales and Australia. I'm just going to put it out there, but one example would be the International Day of Disability in December. Wouldn't it be something if perhaps all of us got behind this hidden sunflower lanyard scheme and also were ensuring that our programming was also welcoming and inclusive for all? So to talk about my role at the Australian Museum, so I've run the action plan that you can see in front of us, and it's just completed. We tried to make it very palpable, our commitment. It's not overly wordy. Everything that it says that we do, and we've delivered on. And the thing that I find most exciting about running the AAP is that it formally acknowledges the barriers and discrimination experienced by people with a disability, and it seeks to actively and effectively dismantle these barriers. Now, 1 in 5 people have a disability, and 90% of disabilities are non-visible. It isn't, in fact, buildings that are the biggest challenge, but rather people's perceptions and understanding. So in the completion of our first AAP, I feel like we've laid some really great foundations in regards to systems and processes, and to some extent our buildings and training. This leads me to the more exciting part, which is talking about where do we really want to go. Where we want to go is ensuring that society more broadly is accessible and inclusive by default, that no one would need to self-identify or ask, and most importantly, that we celebrate the diversity that comes from difference. And we make this the focus and shift away from this legacy conversation around disability as deficit. The future conversations we want to create and drive is one that is much more joyful and promotes and celebrates the contribution of people with a disability and the richness and diversity that this brings for all of us. This is really embodied in our main entrance at the Australian Museum. If I could use architecture as a great example of summing up where we want to go. There are no steps. Everybody comes through the front door. It's designed to make it the best possible outcome for everybody, regardless of who you are. And it's really welcoming and inclusive. And so we often refer to this in terms of embodying our message. Before I hand over to Cordelia, our first speaker, I did just want to touch on the complexities of working in this space, and that there isn't a one-size-fits-all sort of solution. I wish there was, but unfortunately there isn't. It is very important to note that there are a lot of people that don't want to self-identify and don't necessarily like the solutions closed. And it's very important to continue those conversations and to make sure that we're working with people with a lived disability and having their voices at the centre of everything that we do. So at the Australian Museum, we have a paid advisory panel, which we're very exciting to also have Autism Australia join as well, Matt and Emma. And they really guide and consult on everything that we do at the museum. And we truly believe that having this at the core of our process will ultimately drive better outcomes. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to the AM's Cordelia Hugh.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share I've got a PowerPoint, so I'll just request to share my screen. Is that working for everyone? Thumbs up if it is. Yeah, oh, good. Fantastic. So as Sarah said, the purpose of today is to share our sort of key learnings because when we were developing Early Birds, I met with lots of other cultural institutions as well and really appreciated their advice so we can try and make the world more autism friendly altogether. So Early Birds is autism and sensory friendly mornings. So it's 4 times per year. We decided we'd do one Saturday morning every school holidays. And that was because we wanted working parents to be able to attend as well, and there's no school sport during school holidays. But having said that, it's not just for families with children. Everyone's welcome, so adults as well, and we do get lots of single adults coming to Early Birds. It's free because it's funded by the Australian Museum Foundation, and I can talk more about that later, but I applied for a $25,000 grant from the foundation, so $10,000 for the first event to kick off with all the materials, and then $5,000 to run each subsequent event. And even though it's from 8 till 10 a.m, we say to the visitors that they don't have to arrive. 8 a.m. is very early for a Saturday morning. So we say, feel free to arrive between 8 and 9 a.m. So you have at least a full hour to enjoy the museum all to yourselves. And most people do arrive at 9. And after one of our key learnings, at the first event in January, we limited the tickets to only 120 visitors, but we had about a 50% drop off, which we thought could have been, that was when COVID restrict 4 square metre rule appeared and face masks were mandatory again. And we thought maybe because of COVID, this audience and that it's a free event, that there would be a drop off. But so we increased the capacity for April's event to 500. And we also saw that there was a 50% drop off. So we just expect now that there is going to be probably a 50% drop off. But the museum, we know that it would feel, even if 500 people attended, it would still feel quite quiet and calm. So we're going to stick with that capacity. The normal capacity of the museum is around 3,000. So it is much reduced. And to get the funding from the Australian Museum Foundation, we just had to put together a proposal and present it to the trust. And to do that, we did a lot of consultation to get lots of data and just make it a really robust proposal. Yeah, I sort of heard a little beep, but I don't know if that's someone asking a question or not.
No,
yeah,
it's just someone coming in.
Oh, thanks, Emma. Thanks. So we did extensive consultation. The organisation Plumtree, that's for supporting families with children under 8 years. They have a preschool as well, but they have lots of support programs and therapy services. But we offered their families 30 free passes because the museum used to be $15. entry for adults and free for children. So we offered families passes to come to the museum, and then in return, if they were able to fill out a survey for us. We also had families that didn't attend but provided feedback of what the barriers were of why they didn't feel that they wanted to attend the museum. But there were 30 families that actually did come to the museum and provide feedback. Obviously, Aspect with Matt and Emma here today. We sought their consultation services, so they provided an environmental and program assessment, and 2 of the staff in the environmental assessment have autism, which was very helpful to see how you experienced the museum firsthand. And also the other services that you provide, including like the visual story development, the sensory map, which we ended up combining with the general museum map, marketing and comms, having the style guide and is also very helpful for our marketing and comms team to simply refer to, so they don't always have to come to myself. And you provided autism awareness training for our staff and volunteers. We also consulted Australian Network on Disability, which the museum is I think we're a bronze member, Sarah. It doesn't really matter, but they're on hand to ask.
Gold member.
Oh, we're gold. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
And access. Oh, yes, as Sarah pointed out before, we have an access and inclusion advisory panel. So we can run programs, exhibitions. They're a paid panel, but we can run lots of things past them, and they provide feedback for us. And then, of course, we have visitors attending school groups such as Giant Steps and staff that we can consult with, and other cultural institutions. So Jenny from the Opera House was fantastic. Susanna from MCA, and I have a friend who works at the London Natural History Museum, and they run dinosaurs. So he sent me their full program and what they do, which was very aligned with the Australian Museum, because we are a natural history museum as well. So that was very helpful. But like Sarah said, autism is spectrum and there's no one size fits all solution. So having some knowledge of the common challenges can help museums learn to support this audience to feel considered and welcome. But here are the common challenges that were identified. You can see this is during school holidays on weekends, we can get long queues and crowds and associated noise. But the solution was to open early or late with limited pre-booked tickets. And, because it is, Early Birds is a gate, like Matt says, it's a gateway event. We try and make the experience as close as possible to a general museum visit, but it's in a safe, non-judgmental environment for early birds, so visitors then can feel confident coming back to visit us again during general opening hours. Also, confronting unfamiliar content. I once saw a little girl enter the museum, and in the first exhibition, there's the Bone Ranger, which is the horse skeleton and human skeleton riding the Bone Ranger, the X-ray horse. But she immediately didn't want to continue her visit to the museum, and they left after only being in the museum for 2 minutes. So providing a visual story with images of what to expect in the museum has been very helpful. And we have a sensory map at the museum and a general map, but feedback from the consultation was that it would be really good to combine some of the sensory features for the general museum map to make it really inclusive. And it's been really it's been very positively received, because it's very inclusive, and it also helps the general visitors also realise that there are people who have sensory requirements. So it's just a good reminder as well for everyone. And transition signage. Then very dark exhibitions, or very bright as well. We did in the environmental assessment, you know, there were exhibitions that people just refused to go in because they were too dark. So after the environmental assessment, our exhibitions team worked to increase the lighting in some of the exhibitions or reduce the lighting in some exhibitions like Wild Planet. And then now Wild Planet's now a very calming space from feedback. So, you know, the environmental assessment was fantastic because we've got changes that are kept during general opening hours now. And then also loud or sudden unexpected sounds. You know, we have dinosaurs roaring, thunder, crashing, which, you know, can be quite unexpected and cause meltdowns or sensory overload. So during early birds, we turn off or lower the sounds. And we also have a quiet room just for early birds. I wish the museum had a permanent quiet room. Space is limited at the museum and we're still fighting for it. But during early birds, we turn our members lounge into the quiet room. And then I'll talk about some sensory oasis tents in a minute. But the features, like I've mentioned, you know, it's free, but people have to register, and we use Eventbrite at the moment. And then we've got the quiet area, which is a members lounge. Sarah managed to contact St. Vincent de Paul Society because they provide free sensory oasis tents. So if you would like one, I think you can contact St. Vincent de Paul, but they have weighted lap pads, noise cancelling headphones, fidget toys, and other sensory features in those tents. And we set them up in the exhibition spaces, and children, we haven't seen people use them if they need to reset. We see them just playing in there, but it just reinforces that we're making them feel considered. There is a place to retreat to reset if they need, but they're a nice little addition as well. We've got the visual story with more details on what to expect. Our one's quite long, it's 40 pages. But, you know, this little boy, when he, I think it was this little boy, when he, yeah, it was Emma. So he had a really positive reaction. We sent it out 2 weeks before the event, but we had some hard copies available at admissions on the day. And he ran up and he looked really excited to see the visual story. And I think Emma asked why, like, oh, did he recognize this? And she said, we've been reading it every night for a week and he's been sleeping with it under his pillow. And when he arrived, he said, my book, I'm here. So that was really nice. We've got staff trained in autism awareness and disability. And I think, Helene, you might talk about, we've initiated the sunflower lanyard scheme. So staff who have been trained can wear the sunflower pin, which you can see here. We've also got the kiosk open for an early morning beverage or snack. At the last event, we had someone come from regional New South Wales. They travelled 2.5 hours. It's not that far away, but for an 8 a.m. start, it's very early. So they were very happy to have a coffee and a snack when they arrived. And then, of course, everyone's welcome to stay after 10 a.m, but they just know that features may return. The crowds will increase and other features may return to general opening hours. In the visual story, I've just pulled out a few pages. You know, we've included what to bring. We've included some sensory symbols, positive behaviours, which we also have on the lanyard cards that children or adults or whoever can refer to. We had one little boy start running in the museum and he stopped me and he remembered, he looked at his card and he said, I'm meant to walk in the museum. He was reminded himself of what expectations were expected. But then we've also got, there's the Bone Ranger. So we've included, if we know there are exhibits that might be confronting, we've included pictures of them. So people know what to expect. And then transitions, we've tried to also include entrances to different exhibition spaces. Pacific Spirit has this heritage floor tile that we wanted to warn visitors about too. But because the museum, you know, we're almost 200 years old, so many features of the museum are heritage that we can't change. And on the museum map, we've included the sensory, low sensory, medium sensory and high sensory areas. Some of our exhibitions, we had Tyrannosaurs Meet the Family earlier in the year, and it was very digital, very dark. It was very high sensory. So we just made sure that at the entrance of that exhibition, there was signage indicating that. I also just want to point out that the grey isn't great. Usually a black background for the map would be visually a bit more helpful. But that's been a win, merging the sensory map features onto the general museum map. So we asked staff we have paid staff working the event. We have 7 paid staff, and then we've asked staff to volunteer their time who would like to assist. So we have staff volunteering, checking and welcoming people in, providing directional assistance, facilitating activities in prehistoric playground, which is a new activity space for families. And we've got all our science, we've got the Australian Museum Research Institute at the museum. So lots of the scientists bring out collection objects and man interpretive tables and exhibitions so people can chat to them about their work at the museum, their research and the collection items. And you can see we provide, if people want to use the visual story, we've got the hidden disability lanyards, the sunflower lanyards, but we also had, after the first event in January, some people found the sunflower lanyards quite polarizing because they didn't want to identify the hidden disability, so we decided for the next event, we were going to have just museum dinosaur lanyards as an offer as well. So it's an option. People can choose to have the sunflower lanyard or the dinosaur lanyard, and they can take that as a souvenir of their visit home with them as well. These are just some of the interpretive tables. This is the cultural table. We also had string figures, an actual making activity, making the emu foot and some other things in the April event, which was popular. Our acknowledger, we had one of our acknowledgists come out, malacology, entomology, the phasmids, the stick insects are super popular. My advice is though, say put them on the back of your hand, not this way, because sometimes the children get crushed. Prehistoric playground, this is the lovely sensory fan table, making your helicopters fly. Yeah, the registry is free, but the registrations, you know, we've sold out for all events. We've increased capacity, funded through foundation, which I talked about. And, you know, we don't really spend anything, we don't need to spend anything on marketing really, it's all organic posts. And we received good feedback. The first event in January, there was when I arrived, there was a power outage and they were like, all the lifts are not working. And I was like, oh, this is like an accessible event and none of the lifts are working. And they couldn't get a technician in time, but it was okay. We didn't have anyone in a wheelchair attend, but there were people with mobility issues that struggled. But, fortunately for the next event, that didn't happen. And yes, I think there were also some, with the feedback, it was really great. We wanted to see as well, have you been to the museum before? And there were visitors that hadn't been to any cultural institutions before, and that was their first time visiting a cultural institution. And they said that, you know, they'd probably come to maybe one more early birds before they felt confident coming again during general opening hours. And that's the aim. Like I was saying before, it's like a gateway event. So you can get used to the space in a safe and really non-judgmental environment. I think what visitors like is that it's other like-minded families and audience members around. So if there are, you know, if someone does have a meltdown or is stimming, like it's not bad behavior. There's no judgment. They are the like-minded families. So that's been really nice. And I think where to from here, spot tours. So I had Thomas from Aspect, just is the self-proclaimed dinosaur buff. So he just started doing spot tours and they were really engaging, and the parents were saying it was so nice for their children to have a role model such as Thomas doing something that they would like to do. And I had a speech therapist contact me last week saying she works with children with autism who would like to come and do spot tours at the next early bird. So we're going to see if we can get try and train them up and deliver kids tours during early birds. We might also do, because there is feedback is, you know, there's so much for families and children, but not necessarily for adults. So we're going to pilot an after hours event next financial year. And then we've also seen lots of other benefits. You know, we've seen, you know, this audience, we have repeat visitation during general opening hours, but we've also seen an increase into attendance to programs and events after building that trust relationship. But yeah, it's been a really positive experience. A steep learning curve, but it's been excellent. So I think now we'll open it up for question and answers. Should we unmute everyone, or is it going to be in the chat?
Oh, Cordelia, I think Matt and Emma are going to present now, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Sure. So
I don't mind just unsharing.
Video. Oh no, is it? Stop there. Oh, did someone stop it for me?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name's Matt. I've been working at Aspect for about 6 years. I started as a support worker for adults with sort of higher support needs, accessing the community, going to things like cultural institutions, and recognizing the challenges. And I've had a few different roles at Aspect, and now work for what we call our Autism-friendly team, which we'll tell you a bit more about in a sec, but I'll just let Emma introduce herself.
So apologies, we're actually sitting in the same room, so we have to constantly mute and unmute so that you don't hear three of us at the same time. So I'm Emma. I've been working for Aspect for almost 5 years now. I work in a dual role. So I work as an autistic consultant, and I work with both the Autism-friendly team in collaboration with Matt, but also with our research team. I'm also a qualified early childhood teacher. I'm currently studying a master's in research at Macquarie University, and I have a lot of other things going on. So I'm wearing lots of hats at the moment. So just to start really quickly, for a little bit of information for people who maybe aren't familiar, what is autism? So autism is a set of complex neurological differences that present differently in every individual. So what that basically means is we have a saying in the autistic community: if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, because we're all completely different. So autism is genetically based and is a lifelong and is part of human diversity. So basically what this means is that autistic people develop differently. We think differently, we interact with our world differently, we sense our world differently, and we think differently to what is considered typical. And sometimes this can be really hard to see. Matt and I often say, I'm the least autistic appearing person you will ever meet, right up until the point where I stop coping and the mask comes off, and then I'm the most autistic appearing person you will ever meet. So it's estimated that 1 in 70 people are on the autism spectrum, although recent research figures coming out of the US looks like the incidence is actually coming down to 1 in 55 people on the autism spectrum. And I know Cordelia and Sarah both shared those statistics earlier on about the number of people with a hidden disability. So autism is considered a hidden disability. So what does the Autism-friendly team do? AKA, what does Matt and my daily life look like? So we work with airports, museums, art galleries, shopping centres, libraries, councils, sports groups, random events, anyone who will basically have us. And the whole point behind our job is to support organisations and events to become more autism friendly and hidden disability friendly. So to do that, we assess and adapt environments using our autism friendly framework. We develop helpful resources such as the sensory map that you've seen with Cordelia, and visual stories, communication cards, the list is endless. If you can think of it, we can probably help you do it. So we partner with organisations in inclusive initiatives and events. So with the Australian Museum, Aspect provides a couple of volunteers to support on the day. And we provide training, which is a big part of our framework and a key to everything that we do. So everything that we do is based around the disability concept of nothing about us without us. So in the autism-friendly team, we work fully in collaboration with autistic people. Me being one myself kind of helps, makes it kind of organic. But we also have access to a range of autistic consultants, such as Thomas, who has been helping out with the Australian Museum. And no decisions or no designs, nothing is done without the input of autistic people. And that's right from the beginning of the concept, right from the get-go, all the way through to completion. So what is the autism-friendly framework that I mentioned? The autism-friendly team have developed a framework that all of our work is based on. So it's been informed by research and a lot of literacy reviews and a lot of research projects run by Aspect's Research Centre for Autism Practice, also known as RCAP. But it's also based on 50 years of good practice principles and knowledge that Aspect has developed in the time that it's been opened. And the framework is a constantly evolving piece of information. So it's been improved over time by autistic people's involvement and the outcomes of assessments in various environments.
Cool. So I could speak for hours about the autism-friendly framework, so I'm going to try and bring it down to about a minute. So services that work with the autism-friendly team. So we've recently worked with the Australian Airports Association to develop the Hidden Disabilities Guidelines for all airports. It's the same framework that's used with Australian Museum or any of our consults. Our training is based on it, and our assessments are based on it. But essentially some of the highlights are that organisations provide a culture of inclusion. And that's not just sort of individuals being inclusive, lovely people, but also as an organisation, that the organisation is committed to inclusive practices and promoting them. And that's something that Sarah and Cordelia and the Australian Museum are really good at. Some other key or important features of, I guess, being autism friendly are supporting people to prepare for environments by providing helpful resources beforehand. It's a big part or a big challenge for autistic people is not knowing what to expect or what to do. So being able to provide helpful information beforehand is really important. I guess the interesting thing about this is that a lot of these resources and concepts are actually just beneficial for lots of people. So families, people who speak English as a second language, people who are just anxious and haven't been to a cultural institution before. The next thing is developing well-structured and adapted processes and environments. So it's helping people intuitively in the moment know what to do and where to go. And again, there's lots of things that can help with that. Explaining social expectations. So it's what we call the hidden curriculum. It's the rules that we all assume everybody knows. So COVID's a really good example of this. Rules change and rules are different in different contexts at different times. It's really helpful to be able to communicate clearly to people what to expect and what they're expected to do. Providing training to people. So one of the biggest barriers to people with hidden disability, and especially autistic people, is not just the sensory environment or the physical environment, but it's actually the social environment. It's the judgment and lack of awareness from other people. So it's really important that staff understand I guess what it's like for people and what they can do to support people. And then a really big part of it is just ongoing listening and feedback. It's just continuous improvement. Recognize again, and it is not a one size fits all, tick all the boxes thing. It's something that's a process that we're always learning. So take Gold Coast Airport, for example. We worked with them to develop their Hidden Disabilities program. They developed visual stories as well, sensory maps, and they also utilized the Hidden Disability lanyard. And because of that, now all airports in Australia are also utilizing the lanyard. Helen's going to talk a bit more about where it's come from, what it means later on. But the Gold Coast Airport also adapted some of their processes. So security, border force, and customs, which are notoriously challenging and inflexible usually, they actually, after training, adapted a lot of their processes to be more supportive, allowing people time to have a bit more time and support, I guess, through the processes. They also adapted their physical environments. So they identified a quiet entrance to the airport. They took out hand dryers in one of the bathrooms near that entrance to be able to make it a low sensory bathroom. And that's where the quiet room is located as well. So it allows people, I guess, an easier journey in to the airport. And obviously the preparation material beforehand really helps people to know, what am I supposed to do when I get to security? And what am I supposed to do after that, I guess. So the same sort of things, I guess, we worked with Cordelia and Sarah to develop at Australian Museum. Like Cordelia showed you earlier, the visual stories, the sensory maps are really helpful, but obviously adapting the environment, ideally, generally, as much as possible. So Cordelia touched on one of the displays of the exhibitions called Wild Planet. It was very, very bright and there was lots of glass. And so when we did the assessment, there was lots of light reflecting off the glass, but it also caused it to look like there were double the amount of people in the room because all of the people's bodies were reflected off the glass too. So it looked really congested and busy. And as soon as they lowered the lights a little bit, it's a much calmer environment to be in for longer. So that's something that's there all the time. But then obviously there's some things that that need to be adjusted for autism specific and sensory specific events like early birds. So based on our work with Australian Museum and with MCA and a couple of other cultural institutions, the Autism-friendly team's just recently been awarded a government grant to expand on a lot of this work. Specifically in Sydney and specifically in cultural and sporting institutions. So there will be more of these programs happening over the next year as well. These programs will be co-developed and co-delivered, like Emma said, and we'll be trying to obviously build the practical capacity of those museums in particular or other cultural institutions, but also developing good practice guidelines, resources, and online training that can help support other cultural institutions more broadly. So the program obviously is developing partnerships, developing guidelines, developing a calendar of sunflower events, developing an online training module, again, that can be accessed by people outside of Sydney as well. We're also going to be developing a sunflower ambassador role for a person with a hidden disability who can talk about the benefits of these types of programs. And then we'll have an evaluation supported by our Research Centre for Autism Practice. So that's a little bit about, I guess, how we work and how we worked with Australian Museum. We do utilise the hidden disability sunflower now in all of our work. So again, all of the airports will be utilising that, Australian Museum, and also these cultural and sporting institutions that we'll work with. And that's why I guess we've developed a relationship with the Hidden Disability Program, which Helena's from. And so I'll let her talk more about what that means, that program specifically.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Can everybody see the slide? Yeah, thank you. So I will talk a little bit about the sunflower, but it's going to be generic explanation. I want to leave time enough for the Q&A at the end. But what is the sunflower? It's a way for people who decide to, who have a hidden disability, to identify themselves in a discreet way, to make themselves visible, and to tell people around them that they have a hidden disability. So the sunflowers started at Gatwick Airport in 2016, when the staff of the airport were asking their manager that how could they support people and the passenger with a non-visible disability. They receive extensive training for people with visual recognizable disability, but they found there was difficulty to identify people with non-obvious disabilities. So the airport team worked with different peak bodies at the time, and they came with the solution, a very simple solution, the sunflower, which the symbol was globally recognized and gender neutral. And it was a bright color that was easily identifying for the staff to recognize, but at the same time, discreet for the wearer. They also developed a very simple training for the staff. So what to do when they see someone wearing the sunflower. So it was very simple guidelines, such as asking if they can help, not judging the person, and be kind and show respect. So since 2016, the sunflower has been expanding globally. We have now on our map more than 8,000 organizations globally that recognize the sunflower, from all size organization and from the public and private sector. And we have 3 million lanyards that's been distributed in 39 countries. In Australia and New Zealand, the sunflower has launched last October. And since we have launched, we had very positive response from different organizations. This is not a full list, but some example of the organization that are now recognizing the sunflower. So the lanyard is probably the most commonly used product for the people to identify, but we have a different series of product that also designed for the wearer and also designed for staff of the organizations who support the sunflower. So some organizations want to identify the staff who received the training to recognize the sunflower. So we have different pins to identify the staff so that they can recognize what it means and how to support people who decide to identify. And the thing with the lanyards as well is that any kind of ID can be attached to it. So hidden disability includes so many different conditions. Not every wearer are on the spectrum. Some of the sunflower wearers have dementia, Alzheimer, chronic pain, multiple sclerosis. So we encourage people to attach the card to the lanyard, the card that they feel will give a little bit more additional information about their condition so that they can receive the support that they need. For the organization who joined as well, we have simple 3 videos that help training the staff. So we have, in total, it's less than 10 minutes. So it's about 3-4 minutes per video. The first video is what is a hidden disability? What is a hidden disability sunflower? And what is a hidden disability? And what should I do? So it's easy for people to include in their training. However, some large organization decide to include the sunflower training into the existing program. So that's quite flexible, but for those who wish to have the videos, we can give them access. There's no really one way to join the program, and this is a little dry, but I thought to explain a little bit what financially what this would look like. The purpose of the sunflower is to be inclusive, so we also encourage large number of organizations to recognize the sunflower. So we don't want to have a high cost. We want a small mom and pop shops to be able to join the sunflower as well. But those are just 3 examples of different way that organization wanted to be involved. So we work in a hospital in New South Wales. We work with Health New South Wales, and one hospital didn't feel that they wanted to distribute lanyards for the patient, but they wanted to train what they call the super nurse, who receive a training, including training on distant flower and hidden disability in general. So they just decided to purchase pins for some of their nurse. We also have, we work with one visitor attraction who wanted to have a mix of lanyard, ID card that they customize, some pins and display box. So the cost was a little more. And then some people decide to not identifying their staff, but really just distribute lanyard. So that's another way. And other organization, for example, the MCG wanted to have a bespoke lanyard and bespoke card. So it's very flexible. It can go from really just having a sticker in the front door saying that the organization recognizes sunflower and staffs are trained, all the way to distributing lanyards to all the visitors that need it. We encourage organizations who can to distribute lanyard, because we really like the idea that people can get a lanyard if they want to, free of charge. But we leave it to the organization to decide what is the best fit for them. So I keep it very simple, as I want to leave time for the Q&A for everybody. So thank you for the opportunity. And how do I stop sharing?
I think it's at the top in the
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you so much. It is such a beautiful, elegant solution. It was very exciting when we first heard about it. So if I could just ask everyone, if you have questions, if you could please pop them in the chat function. And Matt, if you're able to unmute anyone that might want to just give verbal, have a conversation or ask any questions outside of the chat function, we'll answer them in a moment. And while we're waiting for any questions to come through, I did just want to highlight that this talk is being recorded very much for the purpose to be shared. So if I could ask for anybody listening, please do share this recording within your organisation, share it with other cultural institutions. We would really appreciate that. No questions so far.
Actually, I saw there was a question regarding the training.
Oh, there is. Oh, sorry. Hello. Do you provide training beyond the 3 videos?
So we only have the 3 videos that we provide, because it's very simple and easy for any organization to just recognize a sunflower. But we do offer, for organizations who want to have a training more in depth, we very welcome that. But we work with partners like Aspect, like other peak bodies that are very expert in giving trainings. So depending on the needs, we will work with partners.
And although we're an autism-specific organisation, we have done a lot of work in general hidden disability spheres. So we do partner with Helen and partner with the Hidden Disabilities Lanyard Scheme to deliver sort of more higher level training on hidden disabilities in general. We just use autism as an example. But a lot of what Matt and I train on is universal design, and what works for autism often works for a lot of hidden disability as well. Does anybody else have some questions? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
I think we could possibly wrap it up. We'll wait a few more moments to see if there's any other questions. But Cordelia, thank you so much. Matt and Emma and Elena, it was really lovely to have all the different sort of, I guess, partnerships of everyone coming to talk about how an event like Early Birds comes about. And just also, I just would like to mention Cordelia actually won an award from Aspect for, she's getting a bit annoyed at me for mentioning it. But I did want to mention it because it is important, and the reason specifically why Cordelia won that award was about the fact that she did such fantastic consultation, and that that is so important, and the work that she'd done through Plumtree and Giant Steps with Aspect and so on is really critical. So I think we have another question. The front of our staff work to provide excellent customer service overall, not just for people with hidden disabilities. Please talk more about why the sunflower is needed. Great question.
Well, I can talk from the perspective of someone who has a hidden disability and regularly attends theatres as well. So Riverside's one of my go-tos. For me, wearing the sunflower in a place that's trained to sunflower means that I know people are going to recognise that I might need a little bit of help. Something that often comes up in a theatre space for me is that there's no warning about strobe lighting or about fireworks or sudden unexpected sounds or pyrotechnics, which can lead to me having a meltdown in what's supposed to be an enjoyable experience. So having a way to identify to staff that I'm not drunk and on drugs, which is the two things that I commonly get accused of when I'm having a meltdown, and that I might just need to be escorted to a quiet space or just have a little bit more time to do the check-in process or have a little bit of support finding my seat without having to walk up and physically say to people, which is something that regularly happens to me, I have autism, I need you to help me, and then have to explain myself. Taking away that need for advocacy and having staff just recognize, oh, this person who maybe needs a little bit of support without me having to publicly announce it is kind of the best thing in the world for me. And it's why I love my sunflower and taking my sunflower lanyard where places are trained. So things like airports, it helps them identify why I might be acting weird going through security rather than just assuming, again, I'm suspicious, I'm doing something wrong, I'm drugged, I'm on drugs, like I'm drunk. It's a quick way for people to visually identify that person needs a little bit more support, and it just breeds that level of understanding. It helps people recognize that there are people out in the environment with a hidden disability, and it's kind of like a little reminder as well.
And I think just on that, I guess ideally, you know, your staff are trained to support people and give extra time and all that sort of stuff regardless. And I think that's fantastic. That's not the case everywhere. And still, I think there's a lot of, you know, Sarah gave the figures earlier. 1 in 5 people have a disability in Australia. Up to 90% of those are hidden disabilities that you wouldn't be able to see visibly. That impact people, and people have to often use their own strategies, have to, you know, plan beforehand, have to feel uncomfortable. And so even just as an awareness piece, I guess, to teach people that there are hidden disabilities and that some people need extra time or support is really important. Again, hopefully, you know, people don't even need to use the lanyard because they get that support, but there are a lot of instances, again, you know, security in the airport is a really good example of that. Where people need, you know, in novel, scary environments that are overwhelming, to be able to identify that they need extra time or support. And again, in a discreet way that doesn't say, I have autism, I need specific things. It's just that, hey, I need a bit of help.
I'm happy to share an example as well, because I have chronic pain, and in my 20s, I had quite a few years where I literally couldn't sit at all. I'm not exaggerating. So something as simple as going to see a movie was something I couldn't do. And my partner at the time would take pillows and we would go and lie down on the floor at the front. And it was, you know, it was so exciting to be able to just go to the movies like everybody else. But of course, I would always get questioned. And luckily, because I was with him, I never actually got thrown out. But if I had had the hidden sunflower lanyard at the time, it would have drastically improved my quality of life, because my main problem was that I was 20, I was young, I looked healthy, and everybody would question it. And then I'd have to explain myself, and it was very uncomfortable. So I think it's a really beautiful, elegant solution. And yeah, that's my personal experience with it.
And I think the key to it is that it's optional. So I'm generally functional in a lot of environments. I'm quite a highly functional adult that lives normal everyday day life. But if I'm in a situation where I'm in a novel environment or I'm having an overwhelming thing, I can just pull the lanyard out of my bag and put it on. So I can choose not to wear it 99% of the time, but that 1% of the time where I need that identification and that support, I can just put it on.
Okay, brilliant. It looks like we're at the end of our time. There aren't any other more questions. I'd just like to thank everyone attending today, and also everybody listening. And as I mentioned, please do share this recording around within your organisation, and please do send it to other cultural institutions that might be interested. We really, truly are keen about driving greater outcomes and working collaboratively. So we hope to hear more from everyone else soon. And thank you so much to everyone that tuned in today and that listened.